So most people are looking at hair transplant results in two ways. It's looking great, it's a success. It's looking terrible, it's a failure. But let me tell you, there are actually two types of hair transplant failures. The first type that I like to call a screaming failure, when it's just so obvious that everybody is noticing it, even at first glance. And then it's the second one, a silent type of failure, where it's not necessarily obvious to anybody around, but the person living with that hair transplant who is looking at it close up every single day. And in today's video, I'd like to show you examples of both, what went wrong, why, whether it can be fixed or not, after advising close to 2,500 clients through their own hair journeys over the years. And I will share with you as well which of these types of failures are more versus less likely to still occur as of 2025. And again, this will be just based on my experience and my observations I have done over the years. My goal here is not to scare you, but pretty much prepare you so that you won't become another patient writing a regret story online. If you are new here, this is Let's Get Hair. My name is Matt. I had done 3 hair transplants, and since 2017 I've been helping men and women navigate hair loss and hair transplant industry and help them get their hair back the right way. And if you are planning to have a hair transplant soon, I've linked the most important videos. I call them the must-watch playlist before your hair transplant. It's gonna be right down below in the description below, entirely for free, and it gives you the foundation to spot red flags and make smarter choices as a hair transplant patient. And now stick with me until the end of this video, because what I'm about to share with you is gonna save you years of regret. So let's talk about the first type of hair transplant failure that I like to call a total surgical blunder. This definitely belongs to a class of screaming hair transplant failures if you look at cases like this example right here or this type of example. Okay, so what we can see here is an obvious surgical error. We can see bad angles, bad directionality that create an appearance that create a lot of unnaturalness. We can see that the transplanted zones in both of these cases look totally independent from the existing hair zones in terms of naturalness, in terms of density, in terms of looking artistic and whatnot. We cannot even consider this artistic. But to put it simply, the transplanted hair in this case is not blending with the existing hair. In some cases, there was even an obvious gap between the existing hair and the transplanted hair zone, and a failure to interconnect and blend both zones in a very smooth and natural way. Now, why that happens? The surgery has not been performed by a doctor, or it was, but the doctor didn't have any idea what he was doing, or maybe it was being done by technicians who also didn't have any idea. A proper hair transplant and natural looking hair transplant should be executed. How to fix that is either by removing those grafts surgically via extraction, the same way they are being extracted from your donor, or if you want to avoid surgery, you can use laser removal. You need multiple sessions, it will be less costly, it will be less invasive, but you are permanently losing those grafts in such case. On the other hand, if you decide to have them removed surgically, you can naturally reuse them elsewhere on the scalp or put them back into the donor reserve. Now, this type of surgical blunder where you see high angles, unnatural directionality, even doubles and triples and multiple follicular units placed in the hairline, like all that can sometimes look very masked, and it can actually be a silent failure. Like, for example, we can see in these cases where we can see that the density looks good, the guy got 3,650 grafts, is looking full, but hey, once you decide to buzz it or trim it short or, shave it, you see the blunder again. We can see an obvious gap between the existing hair and the transplanted hair zone, and in this case, the transplanted hair zone, you can see here, in my opinion, should have been done in a lower density so that it could have matched this area and maybe add more hair to this region so it will kind of blend much better instead of, doing such a high contrast. And sometimes this issue can remain like buried underneath, and you can only see maybe some patchy growth, and you can see kind of in between those hairs like you can see in this example. But once you decide to kind of trim it down like here, you can notice that the directionality and the angles of those grafts are incorrect, and that's why it's not blending, and when the hair is longer it kind of uncovers automatically some of the gaps because the angles are high and the directions are misaligned. The hair is not flowing in a natural uniform flow, but it's like all over the place on some areas, which naturally uncovers those gaps. Now, this failure is actually not as common as people think. It's mainly happening in very low-cost clinics like India, Pakistan, and all of these developing countries, but some of these results, like this one, actually happened in the UK not that long ago, and this one is actually happened in Canada. I did a dedicated video on this 2 years ago. So these issues can still happen, and they do happen even in clinics in the West where you could pay like $10,000 and you get this. Super unfortunate. Now let's come to the second type of hair transplant failure that is actually the most common one in the hair transplant industry right now. Again, based on my opinion and based on my observations. So what we can see here is very low density result or very minimal change despite a relatively high amount of grafts being transplanted. It's a low graft survival rate, and on some cases it literally looks the same as before despite, like in this case, 4,000 grafts being transplanted, but on the after result almost nothing changed, right? As you can see here, that's after and that's before. So very unfortunate. Now, why the graft survival rate related hair transplant failure is the most common one in the industry? Well, it's because the graft survival rate is actually being tested many times throughout the procedure and even after the procedure has been completed. So first, during the extraction, if you don't have the proper extraction technique, you will transect, you will damage the grafts, and this diminishes the survival rate. This diminishes the overall yield. Number two, the storage of the grafts. Some clinics don't have the optimal storing conditions. The most common storing solutions are either saline or PRP plus hypothermal solutions, and they should be optimally stored around 4 degrees Celsius. Some clinics ignore it, and then if they extract the grafts, they put it in a solution for many hours. If the solution doesn't have the optimal consistency and conditions, the survival will start diminish already at that point. Number three, graft survival rate is being tested during the placement as well. The placement is usually done by technicians, by assistants, most of the times in most of the clinics over the world, even in the good ones, because the doctor cannot really do all of the steps by himself, especially if he's doing like 3, 4, 5,000 grafts types of surgery. So during the graft placement, each additional manipulation of the graft, each additional touch, especially touching those grafts or tightly pressing on them and firmly holding them near the dermal papilla area, can cause the grafts to prematurely die out, so-called ischemia or sudden death. And sometimes it doesn't look like these grafts have died out, but you will notice it a couple months later once you are supposed to get the regrowth, but you won't, or the growth will be less, as you can see in some of those images here. Number four, when the graft survival is being tested, is also general negligence from the doctor or from the assistants during the surgery can cause infections or any type of inflammation to develop either right after the surgery or in the later stages during the healing phase, and this infection will also affect the survival rate. Number five, undisclosed diseases patients may have, mainly related to like autoimmunity, can also cause the survival rate to diminish. And number six, the overall negligence on the patient side this time. For example, if somebody is a heavy smoker and is like irresponsibly not respecting the guidelines or instructions of the doctor post-operatively, in such case, you can also get in trouble and diminish your graft survival rate partially to an extent. And in such case, the survival rate will not be like 90 to 95% ideally, or even higher, but it will be, in the 50s, in the 60s. In some cases, we can see here, it's probably 10% or less, unfortunately. The solution to this low graft survival problem for the patient is usually just get another surgery and hoping that next time it will be better. And from my observations, rarely it happens that the next time you will have a bad survival again, because most of the time the problem was in the clinic that did that the first time. Rarely it happened that I've seen some people get little yield another time too, which again was related to maybe some autoimmune conditions that are attacking their new follicles and not enabling them to have the optimal survival. But this is quite rare from my observations. Or for example, if somebody is using higher doses of androgenic anabolic steroids and is not disclosing it to the clinic, is not taking finasteride, yes, in some cases, the survival rate will be diminished even second time. Now let's look at the other type of hair transplant failure, which sometimes can be described as silent hair transplant failure, but in other cases it can be more obvious. So if you look at this hair transplant result, which looks like a shorter buzz cut, we can see that okay, it's looking odd, but maybe he just needs more density and it's gonna look fine. Well, not really. Look at some of the photos when the patient decided to cut his hair much shorter, like do a buzz cut. We see that there are suddenly more problems than before. It's called cobblestoning. Now, cobblestoning means that the incisions during the implantation phase have been done very likely too shallow in combination with using grafts with too much surrounding tissue around them. And this is a perfect recipe for this unfortunate phenomenon when the scar then heals in a volcano type of shape where it's like creating that bump. And again, it happens because the clinic has no idea how to properly create a natural and artistic hair transplant and also leave the skin unharmed or the least harmed, at least make the skin look smooth after that, as it always should be, by the way. The hair transplant should not have these bumps. The solutions are twofold. Number one, you do SMP, scalp micropigmentation, but you are only masking the issue. You are not getting rid of it. And the second way how to target it would be to extract all of those grafts where the skin tissue is kind of creating that volcano type scar around it and hoping that it will help to smoothen the skin. And in many cases, it actually does help. From my experience with clients and results like these, where people came to me with this problem, and I usually help them find the best doctor for extracting this surgically, and then the skin actually looked very smooth in most of the cases. So additional surgery to extract those hairs actually helped to make it look smoother, and then you could work maybe with some laser resurfacing and maybe even add SMP if you really want, but it's not really needed at that stage anymore. And although this hair transplant type of failure is not the most common one, unlike the low survival rate problem and the patchy growth and all these things, it's definitely something that is a silent failure, and many people can discover it sooner, some people very late. For example, with this female, she discovered it probably sooner because she did just a small transplant in the front, and females are even more attentive to their appearance, so she probably discovered it. But many men, for example, who kind of get a hair transplant and don't decide to shave it initially and just keep the hair fairly long like this or much longer, and once they visit the barber and he does a short buzz cut or a fade and whatnot, and then they can see something like that, which looks like abrasive paper in here. But again, this is a mixture of cobblestoning and also high angles and bad directionality and doubles in the front, which causes that abrasive paper like appearance. But here it's mainly the cobblestoning that kind of adds on to that. So yeah, it's possible to get rid of it. It's not the end of the world. It just needs a lot of revisions and smoothening, similar to the first hair transplant failure type, where it's like high angles, it's bad directionality. You need to do usually just surgical removal, do multiple sessions. The repair is time consuming, it's costly, you need multiple visits, and then you need to also wait a couple weeks and months for this to heal to see if you can work on it again and so on. So it's very annoying, but it can be fixed quite well. Not entirely, but it can be fixed quite well from my observations. What is another type of failure, which I would say is the second most important failure in a hair transplant industry after that graft survival rate problem? It will be the donor area. Now we're finally talking about the overharvesting and things that many guys already know, and something that is a big problem in this industry. And with this one, it can also be a silent failure for quite a while. For example, if you are the type of guy who likes to wear your hair longer on the sides and back like I have right now, or longer, and then once you visit the barber and he does a fade, and then you notice this. It's a clear distinction between your existing hair that hasn't been touched during the extraction and then your transplanted zone. And then you are like, oh my gosh, this is looking very bad, right? So what to do in such case? Well, you have two options. Either you do SMP, scalp micropigmentation. You will just mask that area. You will not fix the problem physically, but it will camouflage it. It's quite a quick way to do that, which most people decide to do. And the second thing, fewer people do it. It's more expensive, needs a hair transplant expert to do that, who could place new grafts into your donor. Oftentimes, there is nowhere to take those grafts from because the sides and back might be already overharvested and depleted. So they take either chest hair or beard hair or maybe leg hair and place some of it into the most overharvested regions to kind of camouflage it. But I would say the best way for most people will be to do scalp micropigmentation because it's easier, it's simpler, you can see the results faster. Now, the last type of hair transplant failure on my list today can be perceived even a success by the person receiving such a hair transplant initially, but on the other hand, it can look like a screaming failure to an experienced hair transplant doctor, anybody who has a trained eye for facial aesthetics and natural aging. The talk is gonna be about the improper hairline design. And this can actually be a big hair transplant failure, even if such a hair transplant is done densely, it's looking very full, and such hair transplant could be even technically very well executed with great graft survival rate. But the problem is that it most likely won't stand the test of time, especially in these four cases. Patient is very young. Number two, the patient still has aggressive hair loss ahead of him in the future. Number three, he's not compliant to finasteride or dutasteride, or he's unwilling to take them. And number four, using his best donor reserves for this first transplant while recreating a very dense, very straight and sharp looking appearance, leaving him with very little reserves for the future. And even if he somehow manages to keep up with that future balding on the mid-scalp and crown, even if he does that somehow magically, he will never be able to put the same high density as he had done in the frontal hairline zone. So there will always be that contrasty appearance between the stronger and fuller and thicker looking front compared to the weaker mid and crown section. So even if he's not gonna turn into having that island of hair type of appearance, because it's gonna look contrasty in the future. So now that you know all of the failures, all of the types of failures and why they happen, how to fix them, ideally you still don't want them to happen to you. So make sure you check out my free video playlist that I'm gonna link for you in the video description below. And I'm glad that you tuned in to this video. Hopefully it helped you out a lot. And if you need, I will be happy to guide you one-on-one with my consulting service for anybody of you guys who needs my personal help, guidance, recommendations on the best clinics for your hair type, expectations, budget, these types of things. Check out the link for appointment reservations, and until next time.